Hey guys, welcome back to MyJewelryBunch.com. It's Pete from MyJewelryBunch.com, and I want to talk to you today about this beautiful Omega Seamaster. It is a quartz movement. The watch is owned by a customer of mine who he was a retail customer of mine until I closed my store. He now goes to another one of the retailers that I work with, and I just want to explain to you what we're going to do today. We're going to change the movement inside this watch. Yes, while it looks like it runs okay, it does have some problems, and we're going to go and correct that by putting in a new movement today. Let's get started. Like I said, we're going to change the movement in this watch, and the reason we're going to change the movement in this watch is this watch has had a lot of issues over the years. It's it's a watch that has been worn on a daily basis. It's gone through, a lot of ups and downs. It's had a good life, but it has a couple goofy little problems. One we solved by putting in a new timing circuit in it, but it runs erratically, and for some reason it eats batteries. So a battery will last about 4 months in this watch, maybe 5, and then the battery will go dead. That is the latest problem with it. Prior to that, it just wouldn't keep time. It would run about 4 minutes slow a day, no matter what we did to try to time it right. And sadly, the customer did send it off to Omega. Omega quoted him an ungodly amount of money to replace the movement. And what we're going to do today is use the equivalent ETA movement for this particular watch. So let's get it open and let's start changing over the movement. This, as you can see, is the actual Omega movement. And if I can get in here and take a good look at that, we know it's an ETA movement. It is an ETA, it's a unique ETA model because it's made specifically for Omega. However, ETA does make its own version of this particular movement, and that's what we're going to put in today. So let's get this out of the case. And first thing I want to do is get the crown out. And here is our original Omega crown. Get a good shot of that. It's in good shape. Gaskets are good. I've replaced those before, and I'm not going to touch them this time. Now we're going to undo the case clamps. I'm going to zoom in here a little bit. Now, don't forget, guys, if you're going to do this yourself, make sure you've got parts trays. Make sure you handle these little tiny parts with care and ease, because they will fly if you squeeze too hard. Okay, so now the movement is loose, and now we can take it out of the case. Okay, there is the watch case itself. And now what we got to do is get that out of the, get the hands off of the watch. I'm just going to take the battery out. And remember to be very careful. You don't want to damage the dial, nor do you want to damage the hand. So you're just going to lift up very carefully on this. The hand should just pop off just like so. And then always put those hands aside in a nice safe place, just like that. Okay, with this particular movement, we do have the spacer, the case spacing ring. We're just going to pull that off and put that aside. And then we have to remove the dial. Now, I'm going to get this in focus, and I'm going to show you how this particular movement works. You have little dial clamps here and there, right there. And how that works is I take a screwdriver, usually like a 1mm or a 1.2mm screwdriver. So I will wedge that into the clamp location, just like so. And then I will turn it, and it undoes itself from the dial foot, which is right here. We'll do the same on the other side. just like that. And now the dial should be loose and it comes right off. Put that aside, and here is our movement. And again, this movement runs, but for some reason I just can't get it to run more than 6 months on a battery. Even no matter how good the battery is or what type of battery I've used, it always fails at the same time. So we're going to grab our new movement, and here's how it ships. Comes from the factory with the temporary hand in place. That's to keep the cannon pinion and the hour wheel in place. And there is the back of our new watch. And if I hold this like this, let me grab the old movement and we'll do a comparison. Okay, so we're looking at the two movements, and you can see the biggest difference is that Omega has the damascened metal frame where it says Omega on it, and the ETA equivalent does not. It is the same movement. This is just a newer version of this particular movement. They are both 6 joule, and they are both labeled exactly the same, with the difference being the Omega number is here, and if we look closely you can see the equivalent ETA number, if I can get this to focus, right there along the bottom. So here's the ETA version of this particular watch. So that is that. That's how that works. Now what I want to do is put the dial on this particular watch. Let me get rid of these old parts and tighten up my gloves. So we're going to remove the temporary hand. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. We're going to remove that temporary hand. I just grab that a little bit like so. Pull it off. And then we will put the dial on this. Actually, before I do that, let me just make sure that the clamps for the dial feet are loose. Taking care not to drop the hour wheel off of the movement. Okay, so there's our movement. Let's get our dial set in position. Just like so. I'm going to hold that up and sandwich it together with my fingers very carefully. And then we're going to go back to those dial clamps. And you can see the dial clamp right here. And then I'm just going to push that down very carefully so it catches that dial foot, just like so. That's good. I'm going to turn this over and we'll do the same on the other side. Just like so, we're going to push in that clamp just to catch that dial foot right there. That's that, and now we can set this to midnight. So I'm going to pull this crown out to the 2nd position, and then I'm going to turn this until the date switches to the 3rd. And there we are at the 3rd. So now that the watch is in the 3rd, I can set the watch to midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning, and we do that by putting the hands in place at those particular time. So now it's time to grab your watch hand tool. First thing we're going to do is grab the hour hand. And I am going to set the hour hand onto the movement. Carefully position it so that it's aiming at the 12 o'clock position. Gently put that into place. Then we will check the height of that hand and make sure that it is not going to interfere with anything. And if I have to, I can turn it back and forth and just get it lined up right in the middle. That looks pretty good. Okay, now that that hand is in, I can grab the minute hand. When you do this, I recommend taking the battery out. Okay, now that the minute hand is in position, I can make any little tweaks that I need to make to this so that the hands don't rub against each other. And we will look very carefully to make sure that there's a space between the hour hand and the minute hand, if I can get this to focus. And we're good. We've got some clearance. A little hard to see here, but we've got enough clearance between those two hands, so they should go all the way around without touching anything. I think that's good. Okay, so now before I put the second hand on, the next thing I'm going to do is actually take this crown off, this temporary crown. Now there is no battery in this, so it's not going to run. I'm holding this up. We're gently going to unscrew the screw clamp or the clutch clamp that's right here. And you'll see on this movement there's an arrow indicating if you loosen the screw up, it releases the clamp to pull the stem out. So we're just going to gently release that by giving this a whole counterclock turn. That should allow us to pull this out. And it does. That's good. Now I'm going to flip this over and we will attach the second hand to the watch. Let's just get that back into position. Push it down. Okay, now that's done. I'm just going to make sure there's no debris on the dial. Okay, so with our hand in place, the second hand is all set. Now I want to show you the case ring here. Let's move these out of the way. So on the watch case ring, this is the plastic ring that holds the movement in place. And that's all it is, it's just a plastic ring. One of the things you have to notice here is that there's a small hole right here, and that's where the stem goes through. It actually comes through the case of the watch, goes through here, it'll go through this ring, right like that, and into the watch movement. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that it's lined up correctly. The first thing I do is I always insert the movement and get that in position. Then I will line up this little hole with the hole on the watch movement right here. So I'm going to get that lined up as best I can. And there's a little trick to making sure that these are aligned correctly. So get this ring into position. Don't worry about how well it's aligned. We can kind of tweak it a little bit after we get it in. So now that it's in position, what I want you to notice is that right here is where the case screw clamps onto the watch movement. This area, this gap in the plastic watch ring should line up with that. And if it doesn't, then we're just going to move it over just ever so slightly. So that if you look now, the case screw would clamp down here. The clamp itself goes into the watch case under here. And we have a nice gap in between going from one point to the other. And now the secret to getting our stem and crown back in is just to make sure that we're lined up. And you'll know you're lined up if you can put the crown all the way into the watch movement, just like so. And then we can tighten the clutch up so that the stem does not release from the movement. Okay, so I've got that clamped in. Now if I pull that out, we should get one and then two clicks. Let me zoom out a little bit. And if I pull this out to the second click, I should be able to turn the hands all the way around without an issue. Okay, now I have not clamped down the watch movement yet. The next thing I'm going to do is put the battery in, and we're just going to make sure that the watch runs without any issues. So the battery's in. Let's put this up like so. So far that part's done. I'm going to flip this back over. We're going to zoom back in just a little bit. And now we'll get those clamps in place. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your clamp, and the clamp is going to be the first thing that you're going to put into position. So I'm going to grab my clamp right here. I'm going to put that into the movement or onto the movement. underneath the case edge so that it's in the right position. Now occasionally some people will accidentally drop these into the movement, and if it falls into the case, you have to take it out, take the movement out and redo it. And of course that's never happened to me, but it does happen to some people. Let's get our case screw, and you remember these case screws are very, very small. You're going to line that up, get that onto the clamp. Okay, got it in place. Now it's time to tighten that up. Okay, so one clamp's in place. Now we'll do the opposite one here. Okay, as you can see, both clamps are now in place. So we have the lower clamp and the upper clamp. Here is our pressure release valve for diving. Watch is still running. That's a good sign. I'm going to set the time and date. There's a quicker way on the Omega. Let me just set this. This should be noon. And it is approximately 2:27. So I'm going to push that back in, pull it out to the first click. And now I can just change the time like so. And like I said, it's 2:26, so we'll get to 2 o'clock, 2:27, right about so. And screw this back down. And now this watch has a complete new movement inside, and all I have to do is put the back cover on. So while I'm doing that, guys, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what's the difference between Omega movements and ETA movements. And really and truly, there is no difference. They are ETA movements, and the biggest difference is going to be that this is made with the nickel damascene on it. Let's see if I can get that in screen. So you've got the nickel damascene on the movement, whereas you've got brass on the ETA movements right from ETA. This is made especially for Omega. So you just have to remember that they make them and they label them for whoever's using it, whether it's TAG, Omega, or any of the other brands that use ETA movements. There are some people out there who are probably going to say to me that this is terrible, I should use a regular Omega movement and it's not original anymore. Well, to be honest with you, this is the original movement for this watch. It doesn't work right. I've done everything I can to try to get this movement to work right. The price difference between this movement and the movement that I put in direct from ETA is astonishing. For instance, to have Omega put a movement in this watch that is an Omega labeled movement, the same movement that I put in here, is almost $1,000. For a watch retail out of my shop would probably be closer to $400, maybe even less, depending on what particular brand of Seamaster we've got and what movement it uses. So there is a huge price difference. It's the exact same watch movement. So any of you guys who think that we've ruined the watch because we didn't use an Omega labeled movement, I just want you to remember that Omega and TAG and a lot of other manufacturers, while some of them use and make their own watch movements, many use movements that are made by ISA or ETA or a host of other companies. So just remember that, no, it's not an Omega labeled movement. It's the exact same movement. It just doesn't have Omega written on it. So that's how we fix this. This watch belongs, like I said, to a customer or a former customer of mine. His name is Captain Ron. Captain Ron, if you're watching, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. And if you're not a subscriber, please consider subscribing to my channel, as it does help my channel grow. And I appreciate all the help that all of you guys have helped me through over the last year and a half. Take care, guys, and have a great weekend.